Technology clearly has been changing all of our lives and all of our businesses. And with time, technology is continuing to do so, even more so. And so if we want to build a 21st century economy, if we want to modernize our systems, I think technology is going to be essential to doing it. And technology is a tool that can either enhance our lives or harm our lives based upon the way in which we use it. Technologies that we need to be paying the most attention to, clearly blockchain technology is one of them that has an ability to enhance our lives in a number of ways through, call it inclusivity, specifically in the area of financial inclusivity and making sure that everyone has equal access to the same tools, something that I think is essential to living any high quality of life. Other technologies that are obviously very relevant right now are artificial intelligence and how we use it, how we implement it. Clearly, quantum computing and systems of this nature are another area where the world is going to be changing rapidly and something that we need to be paying attention to. And our leadership needs to understand these technologies. How they're used, how they're implemented is going to have a very large impact on the future of our nation. And we need leadership that understands these things and understands how to, from a policy perspective, how to deal with them. And you have so many issues related to technology, from, call it, our tech giants and how we interact with the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, and making sure that the things that they're doing are ultimately serving the greater good, and it needs to be utilized correctly. If we want to build a 21st century economy, it's going to be done with 21st century tools. The way that you deal with fear, we, as human beings, we fear that which we don't understand. The way you conquer fear is with knowledge. And I don't think that we should be afraid of the world changing. We shouldn't be afraid that our jobs may change. It should ultimately improve our collective quality of life. I enjoy what I'm doing. Many people, I live to work. Many people work to live. And that's true. A very, very important nuance, incredibly important. So many people could benefit from doing things that they enjoy doing. And so what should happen through the use of technology is the jobs that people don't enjoy doing should go away and be replaced with technology, freeing us up to do things that we appreciate and enjoy more. And obviously a changing landscape is going to be a little uncomfortable, and we're going to have to develop new skills, and we're going to have to find new jobs, but ultimately our lives should be improved by it. That is the underlying goal of how technology should be used. It should be used as a tool to enhance our lives. But yes, there's a lot of, call it, short and long-term implications of how this technology could be used. The internet that we use today, I often refer to as the internet of information. This is call it the internet of trust. And it's providing all sorts of things, value being the thing that most people focus on first, the internet of value, but it's much bigger than that. At its core, what is a blockchain? It's a system of governance, meaning long-term, it's a system of governance that can allow a democratic system to be more democratic, to actually implement those philosophical views in a way where it's ultimately serving the people as intended, but more so, right, as a tool. From a voting perspective, there's clear implications here. You already have multiple pilots in the United States where this technology is being used at a local level. Long-term, what is the use? So the blockchain is going to allow us to solve one huge thing that has always been kind of a holy grail of ideas, which is digital identity. The internet of information allows you to copy paste. You can take a picture and you can copy the picture and you can copy the picture and you can copy the picture. You can't have a reliable form of digital identity with that type of internet. It wasn't designed for it. You need a tokenized system where I can't take your ID. Digital ID in a way where I know you are who you are, who you are. Once you've solved that problem, you can upgrade voting systems in two major ways. One, that makes it easier for all of us to vote by eliminating a lot of friction to allow us to vote digitally. That will increase voter engagement, greater participation in this democratic system or process. It also should eliminate all voter corruption. All voter fraud should be solvable with this technology. from a currency perspective as well, having been one of the founders of Tether, it has been a successful experiment demonstrating that putting fiat currency on a blockchain has great utility. Tether is doing roughly $10 trillion a year of transactional volume. I'd say that is a proof, it's proof that there is demand for such a thing. Now, there's a bunch of issues with Tether, the organization, but as a proof of concept, it's demonstrated there's demand for this. Governments around the world have looked at this and said, okay, there is merit to this idea. Over the last 3 years, you have a number of governments that have been implementing pilot projects to test using blockchain technology as a way of modernizing or improving upon how their currency can be used. Then clearly the US needs to be evaluating, the US needs to be looking at how to use technology to improve the things it does to constituents. The underpinning or the foundation of the US economy is the US dollar. And so there's in the near term, there's no reason why the US should be abandoning the US dollar. It underpins our economy. Without it, we don't have the flexibility to do the things that we're doing, call it during this time of COVID, the ability to provide stimulus and the same thing that central banks all over the world are doing to weather these very challenging times. I don't think that the US, should be departing from that anytime soon. There may be long-term reasons that might make sense, but in the short term, I definitely don't think so. In terms of the US's balance sheet, we're obviously very indebted. And what are the things that the US should be looking at doing on how to create greater faith and confidence or trust in its currency? I think it's important that the US is a large holder of gold. The US should be a large holder of land. And it's probably not a bad idea for the US to consider owning something like Bitcoin, obviously a very small amount relative to call it its balance sheet, but as a hedge against an ever-changing environment. There are governments around the world now that are holding things like Bitcoin as a hedge against anything that might happen in the world currency markets. And to a small extent, it's something the US should probably look at. If I end up in office, all of my assets go into a trust, everything. I give up, sort of control over everything. And I would always make sure that I'm mitigating those risks. If you've ever seen me speak publicly, I am probably the most vocal person that is not acting in conflict. I'm consistently talking about how I am, call it blockchain agnostic, in the sense that these arguments of my chain is better than your chain or my coin is better than your coin is an argument that I don't support. I believe in innovation in general. And if anyone succeeds in making the world a better place, we all win. And everything should be evaluated on its own merits. You shouldn't be picking things and supporting things because you have a vested interest in it. And I think I've demonstrated for a long period of time that that's how I operate. I have a long track record of being in service and trying to move innovation forward and not taking into consideration the projects that I'm an investor in, the projects I'm an advisor in, the projects I may have even co-founded. I'm consistently saying, let's support innovation in whatever form it comes, because I don't know where the great things are going to come from. They could come from anywhere, left field, right field. Let's make sure that we continue to have an open mind and make sure that we are making the best decisions possible at that moment based upon the information we have. Well, I think we need more positive regulation. One of the problems we have in the United States right now is there's a lot of regulatory uncertainty. Entrepreneurs and investors don't like uncertainty. And so you have a lot of the best innovators in the United States leaving to build their businesses in Europe or Asia or Latin America. The United States historically has been the capital of innovation. We should not be having our great innovators leaving the country. And what you need to do is create things like a regulatory sandbox where you say, we are going to reduce the regulatory bar to allow entrepreneurs to innovate. For call it your first 2 years of operations, you don't need to have the equivalent of banking licenses to innovate at a small level. Once you've reached a certain level of assets or a certain level of users or whatever that may be, then it makes sense that you have these very expensive sort of licenses to be able to operate. What we want to do is make it easier for innovators to innovate. And right now in the United States, it's not easy. We lack regulatory clarity, we lack regulatory certainty, and the bar to operate is very high. We should make it easier for innovators to innovate. First of all, I've never talked about creating a crypto utopia. That's something that the press created. I made the decision in 2016 and 17 to live my life in service, to see how I can be of highest service to the greater good. And as part of that, I made a decision to move somewhere in the world where I have a positive impact. And when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, I'm like, well, I've decided to live my life in service. Let's go see what I can do. And so I moved to Puerto Rico to see how I could assist with people getting roofs back on their homes. And I saw Puerto Rico as a place that had the potential to be a future island of innovation, where entrepreneurship could thrive. And looking at systems like its energy grid that is old and centralized and consistently failing. After Hurricane Maria, we had the longest blackout in US history. It goes down every time there's a natural disaster. And it also just goes down sometimes randomly for no reason at all. A place where renewable energy is well suited. Instead of shipping in fossil fuels to create energy at very high cost, more than 30 cents per kilowatt hour, why not build a solar-based power grid that is resilient? It doesn't go down when there's a natural disaster or for any other reason, and where you can lower the cost to consumers substantially while also providing that power on a renewable basis. So I'm not looking at Puerto Rico as a crypto anything. I'm saying, how can innovation flourish and improve the quality of lives of every person that lives in Puerto Rico? And that's the perspective from which I operate. I've also been very involved in philanthropic causes. We secured $1 million donation for masks related to COVID, to go to Puerto Rico, to go to neighboring islands like the Dominican Republic and Haiti, also to go to places like the Navajo Nation in the US, to the Amazon. We were providing food from farmers to people and families in need during this time where no one was able to work. We've been supporting all sorts of preservation causes, from the Puerto Rican parrot to the manatees. We're trying to do everything we can to be helpful. Again, I'm just one small man, but I feel we've done a lot. And a bunch of people have moved down there that are trying to see how they can be of service as well. I feel like things are going very well. Yes, I think that you could argue that, not as a state, but, Puerto Rico is where the conquistadors first set up shop. So when you think about how the Americas have been populated, Puerto Rico was kind of like that first state before there were states. But Puerto Rico isn't a state. It's not the 51st state. I think I would be, if elected, the first president that truly cared about the well-being of Puerto Rico. And I think that could be very beneficial to Puerto Rico. I live in Puerto Rico. I care about Puerto Rico. I understand some of the issues in Puerto Rico. And I think Puerto Rico would fare very well by having a president in office that truly cared about their needs and was willing to listen and see how I can be of service to them. Well, I think that debate is over. I mean, at this point, cannabis, whether it be used for medical reasons, spiritual reasons, or even recreation, right? It's been proven that cannabis is less harmful than alcohol. At this point, I think the debate is over. Clearly, cannabis should be legalized. I mean, take a look at places like Colorado that have done this. Colorado now has the best school system because of the tax revenues that it generates. I think that debate is over. And I think the answer is absolutely yes. The federal government should be legalizing cannabis. Black Lives Matter. We have a problem in this country of inequality and injustice, and we need real reform. And we need to shine light and bring these issues to the forefront so that we can actually do something about it. This is not the first time something has happened like what happened with George Floyd. This has been happening and happening and happening. and we need to do something about it, and we need to do something about it now. So in terms of uniting our country, I mean, that's a big part of why I'm running. I look around and I see our nation is divided. I see that the left and the right is becoming further and further apart, more and more polarized, where you have this us versus them, and we're forgetting that we are us and we are them. We are in this together. And right now, our world is changing rapidly, and we're squabbling and fighting over things that in the long run are not going to matter all that much. If ever there was a moment in time for this nation to be united and for this nation to find a path forward that we can walk together, this is the time that we need to transcend politics. This is the time we need to transcend partisan politics. This is a time where we need to put aside our partisan issues and find a path forward. Our future depends on it. I'm the father of 2 young girls. I am very concerned about the future of our nation and what kind of world they're going to live in, and whether or not there will even be a world for their grandkids. We face a number of existential threats to our entire way of life, and we are not focused on the real issues right now. What has served us in the past is not going to serve us in the future. Very difficult job for any president or anyone in government to have to deal with. But crises happen, and we need to always do our best to respond to them as well as we possibly can with the information we have. I think that we didn't respond quickly enough, and there's a number of reasons and a number of, parties to blame. But we could have responded earlier. We could have been better prepared. Preparedness for these types of issues is critical. And what do we do now under the current situation? We have the risk to human life. Well, at the same time, we have the economic impact and the joblessness and everything that's being created. So how do we ensure the safety of our citizens and the people that live here, while at the same time knowing that we're supporting our long-term well-being? I think one of the issues that's not being addressed or brought up nearly enough is mental health. The mental health issues associated with this are, I think, a much bigger deal than the virus itself. People are living in a state of fear surrounding how do I put food on my table? How do I pay my rent, my mortgage, or just my future in general? And how we address mental health issues, that's something that should be at the forefront of the conversation. How do we make sure that we are continually prepared to address the virus itself? And how are we addressing the economic issues and the joblessness? And these are conversations that I feel are not being had sufficiently. I feel like we're being very reactive and we're not being proactive enough. And how are we going to deal with the next issues, the next time something like this happens? We basically gave stimulus to 3 different constituents: the American people in the form of a $1,200 check, small businesses, and big businesses. I feel we gave far too much money to the big businesses, and we should have given a lot more money to the small businesses, many of whom received nothing, and we should have given a lot more money to the American people who have not been able to work. I feel that we could have done a better job of how we allocated those resources. Big businesses should be prepared for issues. Big businesses that have fiduciary duties, boards of directors and management teams, and the potential to have a large balance sheet should have been prepared for a difficult time. We know it's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. And big businesses, I think, are hooked on corporate debt. America has a debt problem. And it starts with the big companies being hooked on corporate debt and making sure that they're distributing as much cash as possible to shareholders, and they are not prepared for difficult times. We have a major systemic risk in our nation, and we need to shore up those balance sheets. Big businesses should be prepared for challenges. Obviously, small businesses are in a very different situation. They're trying to make something out of nothing. There's never enough. They don't have enough resources. Clearly, they're not prepared for these issues. And again, as a small business owner, as someone that is consistently creating things out of nothing, sometimes great things, I believe this nation was built by innovators and entrepreneurs. And I believe that innovators, dreamers, and entrepreneurs are the ones that are going to fix this situation And we need to do everything we can to support those businesses. And the American people, the American people are indebted, whether it be, education, school related debt, whether it be credit card debt, buying things we often don't need. Debt is a major problem in the United States at a government level, at a corporate level, and at an individual level. And if we don't start to learn how to balance our respective budgets across all three of those parties and be prepared for challenging times ahead, we are going to have a major problem as a nation going forward. And these things need to be addressed. I think it's mission critical. This debt load is going to create a lack of confidence in America, in our currency, our ability to issue treasury bonds. And if we don't start addressing these issues, it's going to lead to very, very real long-term problems that are going to undermine our way of life. I think the answer is yes, but I don't think it's going to happen. The answer is yes. If not 2020, 2022, or 2024, let's make it easy for everyone to vote. Let's eliminate that friction, certainly so Generation Z, the millennials, et cetera, the young people can vote. We need more voter engagement, and making it easier will do that. Yes, conceptually, we know the world is changing, and we have to have systems to address the ever-changing environment. And I think there's a huge opportunity to take a look at our welfare systems, how we support people from food stamps to unemployment and all of the government programs. A UBI type of system, which I don't like the idea of a handout, I prefer a hand up. I prefer like what Andrew Yang talked about in terms of a freedom dividend or universal, call it earned income, that you earn this for being part of the civil process. You earn this by being an American. This is a hand up, you're earning it. And I believe there's a better semantic way to address it. And I think that if you give away that $4 trillion a year, I need to do the math, I'm working on that right now. There's all the government programs that we have today may add up to a very similar number. And I'd rather give the money to everyone because you know better what to do with it. If you're a mother of 2 kids, you know what you need more than the government does. And I think empowering people to spend their money and meet their immediate and actual specific needs is better off. And I think right now we have another problem, which is you're unemployed. And you're like, should I take a job? I'm going to lose my unemployment. There's a perverse incentive there versus giving everyone $1,200 a month and saying going to work is all upside. You're giving everyone a reason to do more. Right now, I think there's a misalignment of incentives, and the more you can correct those issues, the better off we'll all be. No, but it can be. The leadership that understands technology, we will be. Yeah, I grew up as a magician. I was even professional for a little while during my acting days, performing in Vegas, on stage to large audiences. So I stopped practicing that type of magic, and I started practicing a more real magic, which is to be an entrepreneur, to create things from nothing. So instead of illusions, I'm actually doing very real things that are going to make a real impact on all of our lives. Please visit us at brock.vote. If you're interested in supporting us, volunteering, donating, we need all the help we can get. We are in this together. This is not about me. This is about all of us. It's about our collective future. And that's not even just in the United States. We are all in this together. We share one planet, and the future is going to happen to you, or the future is going to happen with you. This is the time to get involved. I truly feel this is the 11th hour. This is our defining moment as a species. We need to rise up and create the world we all want to live in. Now is the time to act.